Yeah.
Looks like it's working, Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
That's good. Who won the prize on the basis of? Do you do a thing for the whoever gets the 8 clues?
Yeah, everyone pretty much sent them in.
How many? What are the prizes?
We'll do the photo shoot, pizza,
Nothing.
and I'll donate it towels.
There's How much does it cost for a firework display approximately? Like that one there.
You could spend £20. You could spend.
I would say, where's that?
Hundreds of pounds.
One we did the basis on how much?
About £85.
It's very cheap.
Just did another one now. Similar to that.
Where did you do it?
No, that Kenya.
Ah.
Family party.
Do you need expertise to set it up?
No, yeah. So, know what to buy, then where to go. If you buy too cheap, they don't work properly.
We're back in our.
Back here, we're really thinned out. Well, Ishi, what's going on? You've got COVID?
Oh, no, it's my turn, right? No.
Yeah, that's right. We all tried.
No.
How are you, sister? No. You okay?
I'm good, Hashem, yeah. Babysitting duties, right?
Babies, what?
Every night for the next 10 days.
Babysitting duties.
Babysitting for the next 10 days.
Today's daf is literally got so much lomdus and so much teva and so much chochma to it. Like almost a pity to do in 50 minutes, but we'll see what we can do. I mean, the second half of the daf, the first half of the daf is just continuation of previous. And it's a cheshbon. It's a cheshbon. I met somebody today, well, he said to me that it doesn't have people do this. These daf are not easy. This week, kids. Let's get it clear. We'll try our best. Yesterday, we had a statement from Reb Zera, and actually Reb Yochanan was the first one who said it. Does anybody remember a big statement, the chumrah of Reb Yochanan? What was the chumrah of Reb Yochanan? What was the chumrah of Reb Yochanan? The chumrah of Reb Yochanan was? Sorry, actually I misquoted. It wasn't Reb Yochanan, it was Abaya. The chumrah of Abaya was that kilayim, you're not allowed to get a no, even shaloi gederech hanosan. So let's say you take kilayim and you eat it in a normal manner, or you use it in a normal manner. The halacha is you still get malchus. That was Abaya's chumrah. Even though normally we said you're only allowed, it's only asked if it's a normal manner. This is also even if it's a normal manner. The Gemara asked the question from Isi ben Yehuda. Isi ben Yehuda tried to prove that basa b'cholav is both also to eat and also to get pleasure. Also to eat, we learned actually from Exil Shava, from Anshe Kodesh to Treifa. That was Exil Shava. Also to get pleasure, he tried to find a place to learn from Olah. It didn't work, because each time we found a reason why you can't compare. For example, Olah was never permitted, basa b'cholav, there was a time it was permitted. He tried to learn from Chametz B'Pesach, so he said, no, you can't learn from Chametz B'Pesach, because Chametz B'Pesach also had a time when it was mutter, but Chametz B'Pesach is cause. Eventually he learned from Kilayim. That just like by Kilayim we say it's also bad, no, also b'cholav is also bad, no. So now the Gemara says, V'im Isa, we're up to Chof Hey Amud Adaf, 8 lines from the top. V'im Isa, if it is true like Abaya, that what? That Kilayim is also bad, no, even Shaloi K'derech HaNoson, Nifvoich, let us ask the following question. Mali Klei HaKerem, Shken Lo Yikna Aleim Afilu Shaloi K'derech HaNoson. How can you learn that basa b'cholav is also bad from Kilayim? Kilayim have a very unique chumrah that they're also even shlei k'derech hanosan. Ve'abaya. All Abaya do, it's a question in Abaya. Ask more, what would you ask? Whenever you say a question, you would say, this has a special chumrah, which the other thing doesn't have. What special chumrah does Kilayim have, which basa b'cholav doesn't have? What's the chumrah? Basa b'cholav she'enu k'nei lo ve'le k'derech hanosan, you only get marcus the normal way. Also, it doesn't mention the word achila. Where did we learn the concept that there has to be also only shkidei chanosa? Because it says the word achila. But here it doesn't say the word achila. Since it doesn't say the word achila, so if it is also and always, says the Gemara, the one who asked the question, we learned it out, if you remember, Anshe Kodesh, from Treifa. Rashi bothered that the word's more than nevela. Here's that dafka. It really means Treifa. We learned it from Treifa. Mal in the Veda Derechanosa, was B'chol of Derechanosa. He understood if you're learning to Gzeir Shalom from Treifa, let's learn it out completely. What should we learn out? That it should be Osa only if it's Derechanosa. Why does the Torah not mention the concept of eating by Basa B'chol of itself, and we have to learn it out from Gzeir Shalom? So again, Abaye sticks to his guns, which are that Kilayim, so that Kilei HaKerem is also afilu shloik derech hanosik, right? Kilayim, again, you go to your vineyard, which has got loads of grapes growing, and you plant some wheat, which like a drink or something like this. If you go to a vineyard, loads of grapes growing, and you plant some wheat, according to Abaye, you're not allowed to be nana shloik derech hanosik. What would be shloik derech hanosik with grapes? What would be an unusual thing?
No.
Don't say squeezing it, because we said squeezing is a normal, like grapes. You use it as, let's say, as a doorstop or something, right?
His raisins normal.
Oh, that'd be a good question. I don't know. Maybe his raisins because it's dried. Okay. Says Abaya, if that's the case, how does Issi ben Yehuda learn Bas b'cholov from Kilayim? Because Kilayim's got a special chumrah, it's also shlik derech hanos. The answer is, so is Bas b'cholov got the same problem, the same halacha. Says the Gemara, v'lifroich malik le'akem shkenois l'shas ha'koisha. We said that there are certain things which are always forbidden and certain things which had a time when it was mutter, then it became forbidden. What's an example of something that was always forbidden? Ola. Very good. Ola. Why is Ola? Because from the time it was growing, it was always awesome. Bas b'cholov is not such a good example. Why? Because Bas b'cholov, it was permitted until you mixed it. Very more that Kilei HaKerem, which we're learning Bas b'cholov from, the problem is it never was mutter. You go to a vineyard, plant wheat. What grew is always asa. It never had a time that was mutter. Even the seed becomes awesome. And once you say that the seed becomes awesome, then they did have a shasa kosher. Because what happened was like this. The seed was kosher. If you say, if you say only that which grows is awesome, so then that which was put into the ground is not awesome, then you can't say we're learning out from our Kilei HaKerem of that which grew. That which grew was always awesome. But if you say that Kilei HaKerem is also awesome, the original seed at the time it was mutter. So therefore, we could have eaten it, you could have roasted, ground it, and had to do a flour. Again, if we say Kilayim is also only that which grows, or only that which grows, that was always awesome. If you say even the seed becomes awesome, so you can say the seed had a shasa kosher, and then it became awesome later. So we can learn Bas b'cholov from the seeds of Kilei HaKerem. Says the Gemara, that means you put them into the ground till they take root. For a few days, it takes a few days for seeds to take root. So till they take root, they are mutter. Once they take root, they're awesome. So it did have a shas hakosha. So Bas b'cholov is learned from the seeds that become awesome later. Mosav of Shemai. Let's say you're going for a walk with a plant pot. And the plant pot has holes inside it. We learned it in Shabbos. What happens when the plant pot has holes? It's connected to the ground. So if you're walking through a vineyard with a plant pot, and in the plant pot you've got wheat growing, what have you just done? Kilayim. So now, let's say you're walking a long walk through the vineyard. It takes you, okay, we can still grow while it's moving. So let's say it takes you 10 minutes, quarter of an hour to get to the vineyard, quarter of an hour, let's say. Now, how much do you need to take for Kilayim to be bottled? Rashi brings it. Rashi need 200. Why do you need 200? Because the Torah says by Truma 100, and the Torah uses a Loshen by Kilayim, a double Loshen. The Pasuk says the Loshen is Pentikdash Hamleo, Loisiza Pentikdash. It's got two Yisur. So therefore, Kilayim is 200. So let's say you've got 100 measures of wheat in the plant pot, and it grows in the time that you walk one measure, just one measure more. It's 100 to 101. What's that in? How much you need to be about by Kilayim? We just said it's 200. So if one measure grew, is that one measure bottled in 100? No. So what's going to happen? Your entire plant pot will become awesome. Now, it's mashma that what becomes asa is only that which grew. If you say that the seed itself becomes asa, then why do you have to wait until the amount of time that it grew and measure which is more than 200? Just say that the second you started walking, it's as if you planted in the vineyard, and now the entire plant is also. So why do you have to walk for so long, stand there for so long, that it grew a bit more than the 200th? Just say that the second that you walk in, the whole thing became also as a kashal vadabava. Vadabava says that when you plant in the vineyard, what happens is everything becomes also. And here we see clearly not like that, only that which grows. Let's see inside. Mosiv of Shemai, Amavi otzitz nokov beker. Person passes a plant pot which has holes inside, a perforated plant pot in a vineyard. Im hoisif mosayim, if it grows more than the 200th osa.
No, sorry, not putting the plant on the floor, are you?
No.
Just holding it.
Holding it. Hoisif en, if it adds, it's also lo hoisif lo. Now you just said that the second that you put it in, once it takes root, it becomes also. So therefore, it should be also straight away. You say to me, but the seeds, we said it takes a few days, because that's a seed which hasn't yet grown. You put it in the ground, it takes a few days to take root. But this is already a plant which is already growing. So every second, the second that you put it there.
If you're there for 5 minutes and the plant grows 1/200, that's when it's awesome.
That's right.
If it's less than 1/200.
If that's what 200, it's motor.
Yeah.
And the Gemara's kasha is even if less than 200, this should be also, because at the end of the day, you just said that the seeds themselves become also. You don't need to see, it goes through the air.
Even though it's just like this.
Yes. That is, for example, if you've got these outside your front door, these plant pots, hanging pots. So that's proper, that's good.
Even though there's no roots touching each
That's
other.
right, even if there's no roots. Let's say a famous story about the Chazon Ish, that he held that if the Gemara says that if there's something which can't grow in between, for example, a metal sheet, then it's not considered growing from the ground. And he held that the floors in there are made out of some earthenware called balatot. And he held that can grow through. So therefore he held you're not allowed to move a plant pot on Shabbos because it's growing from the ground underneath. And once the person started making fun of him, he said, you really believe that this root's growing from underneath? He said, let me show you. The person said, I want to show you the Chazon Ish. He picked it up a plant pot and pinked that plant pot had the root growing through. But nice, even without that, the Chazal say it's growing, it's growing. So the Gemara says like this. More answers. We have two psukim, meaning two words, which are self-contradictory. Why? Ksiv, hazel, ksiv, amnei. The words of the pasuk is le'suzva kamacho kilaim pentikdash, lest it becomes forbidden. Hamleo is that which grows. Hazera is the actual seed, and that's its self-contradiction. Is that which is becoming also that which grows, or is it the zera, the original seed? Ksiv, hazel, ksiv, amnei. Okay, it's at the savuami koroi, that which was always growing. That means if you plant it for the first time inside the vineyard, then what happens is the seeds become awesome because the seeds themselves were planted in the vineyard. That means if your original planting was in the vineyard, then it all becomes awesome, plus the seed and the thing. If you plant it out of the vineyard and you're just bringing it into the vineyard, then only that which grows more. And therefore, that answers everything. That means we asked the question, Bosa B'cholov, how do we know Bosa B'cholov is Osa B'hano? Answer we learned from Kilayim. Fred Waki learned from Kilayim. Kilayim was always awesome. The answer is no, it's not. Kilayim, there was a time it was mutter. When was it mutter? We're talking about when you're planting the actual seeds and the seeds themselves are original mutter. So that is the end of the sugya of how we know Bosa B'cholov is Osa B'hano. And it's also the end of the sugya of the words lo ye'ochel, because that's how it originally came. And if you remember, it comes out that we said that chometz on Pesach is also b'ano, Shiur and Niska is also b'ano, and so is Ola, and so is Kilayim, and so is Bosa B'cholov. Okay. Says the word like this: Omar Yaakov, Omar Yochanan, Bakul misvapin. A person is allowed to heal himself with anything, because b'koach nefesh is doicha kol ha'torah kula. Chutz me'atzei Shiur, except from a wood of avodah zarah. And here we have a very complicated machlokes with Shonim, which actually has quite a lot of bearings in different cases. What's wrong with using atzei Shiur? Rashi says that when you use atzei Shiur, your atzei Shiur is wood of avodah zarah. That is actual serving of avodah zarah, because you're showing your belief in serving avodah zarah. Otherwise, why using it? The problem is that it's difficult to understand. Let's say, for argument's sake, I have a backache. and I see a tree growing in that, which is a wood, which a tree which is used for Avodah Zarah, and I take that tree and I tie it to my back to straighten it, or something like that. Or I soak I have a bath using fruit growing from a Shiur tree. How does that show? So Rashi holds the fact that I'm using it as a right that I believe in Avodah Zarah. Tesis says that we're chayshush that you may come to believe in Avodah Zarah. Of course, it doesn't show you they believe in Avodah Zarah. But rather, we're chayshush that you may come. That's it. You'll see that it heals you. So you say, "Oh wow, Avodah Zarah is good." You may come to believe in Avodah Zarah. There's a Ran that says a completely different shot, and he says that we're talking about somebody that's using Avodah Zarah as the healing. That means the priest tells one that by just doing this for Avodah Zarah tree, you'll become better, etc. Now, if you think about it, each one is slightly more qualitative. According to the Ran, it's only also if your intention is actually a kind of service to Avodah Zarah. According to Tosfos, where the chashash is even greater, even if you're not actually, but just the fact that you may come to believe in Avodah Zarah. According to Rashi, it's only when you're being moed in Avodah Zarah. So it comes out nafkiminas, for example. Let's say you want to scratch your back against a church, a cross. Oh, scratch your back against a cross. According to the Ran, it's certainly not a problem, because the Ran holds there's nothing to do. You're not going to be moed in Avodah Zarah. According to Rashi, one could argue it's not a problem because Rashi is saying nira kemoidabo. In what way you're being moida? But according to Tesis, it might be a problem. What do you say?
Yeah, talking about that. I'm using in Germany. There's a place. It's German.
Yes.
There's a town called Was.
Right.
Something Kurz, which is German cross. That's why it's called Mitzalem.
Ah.
There's the Eden called it in Yiddish Mitzalem.
Ah, yeah, because of what's covered
there.
Ah.
Because of the way.
Right. Okay.
Same thing. They didn't use it.
We don't want to use even the name. So one that goes through this whole cheshbon, that mice we know what's going on. Because we've been talking about this Surah Hano. We started off with Chometz is Asabano. How do we know that? Then we started about Asabano. Now we're singing with the Zaz of Asabano. So what it says, a person's about to die. The one having a thought that Pekuach Nefesh is doing everything. If there's no danger, why should you be able to use any Issa? What says, the Tanya of Lezoima. If the Torah says you have to you should love Hashem and you should be willing to sacrifice everything. What? Why is it to say if a person cares more about his life than his money, the Torah says you have to sacrifice everything. For somebody that his life is most important, even his life, and somebody whose money is more important, he has to sacrifice even his money. So therefore, from here we see that for Avodah Zarah, you have to sacrifice for that. Rashi and Sanhedrin asks the kasha, the pasuk doesn't really mention Avodah Zarah, it just says V'ahavta Hashem, you should love Hashem. And l'chayra, it means any mitzvah, because if let's say I keep Shabbos, and I give up my life, that shows I love to Hashem as well. So he answers that Avodah Zarah is the most, because we have a steer, because the Torah says, V'chai bohem, you have to not to die, that Avodah Zarah is the most contradictory to the love of Hashem. So it's only by Avodah Zarah that one has to give up his life. There's a very interesting Yisod Shorish Avodah, that he writes that every time you should say this pasuk, one should picture himself dying on Kiddush Hashem. And he says, either way, you'll come out of shul just as safe as the one who didn't picture this, and meanwhile, you have been zeicher to mekayim this mitzvah of after shokeh b'chol nafshecha v'chol moedecha. You should picture yourself. I remember I was once watching a Rav burning his chometz. I was asking questions from the Pesach. So immediately he stopped me and he said to me, "So you have a choice now. Avodah Zarah jumping into this fire was quite a big fire. What would you do?" Now, first I have to remember that this is a mitzvah. The Rambam writes, and Tosfos disagrees with a very interesting halacha, that what happens if chas v'shalom a person is not moisa nefesh al kiddush Hashem? What would the din be? That means let's say a person was told, do Avodah Zarah or die. And the person is Avodah Zarah. Which Havera has he been over? He says the Rambam has not been over Avodah Zarah because he didn't want to serve Avodah Zarah. He was forced into it. was over this of Kedash was so a mitzvah of dying a Kiddush Hashem. He lost mitzvah say. You can't say it's over the desire. It's not something over the desire. This disagrees. This is mentioned. What? That's what the Rambam says. It's an onus.
Is it onus?
So the Tosis Svah is that normally you've got a Svah of onus. Here the Torah took away the Torah of onus, and therefore you've been over with the Zah. But the Rambam Svah is you can't call him in a way that Nafkamina, for example, it says a kosher le'edus, things like that. Right? That's you have somebody. Utaka, we came chas v'shalom shmad because it was pachad of movers. And afterwards it comes to surely what's Naliyah and everything else. So what's according to the Rambam? Of course you can. It's no worse than somebody who's lost the mitzvah sake. According to Tosis, no, he's an over with his own. Now there's another. It's a lose. There's more lumdus on this stuff than almost anything else. Very interesting shaila. Is it going mechuv to die Kiddush Hashem? Going mechuv to die.
It's not one of the shiurs.
So say even more. Say better. So you said it right. The Shemitz V'Lenech not to do with the Zohar. One of the Shemitz is not to do with the Zohar.
But he doesn't have the opposite side of having to survive.
Oh, that's the shaila. But he doesn't have the mitzvah of after to give up his life. So he could be back as in it. According to the Rambam, that he's only being able to say of Kiddush Hashem, so the guy is not mechuv to Kiddush Hashem. According to Tosis, that it's not avoid the Zohar. This is a form of Zohar. Okay, there's a lot to clear over here. You can be healed with anything. So this is the Gemara, one of the places. There's a few places. I think there's 3 places in Shas. The Gemara tells us the halachas that there are 3 things that a person should better die than give up his life. So than do an aveira. Yes, 3 places: Yuma, Sanhedrin, and Pesachim. So this is one of the 3 places where we discuss it. And now we're going to prove these 3 halachas, that it's better to die rather than to do this aveira. Like we just said, Gidu avoyos the shlichus domim the Tanya. We have a brayso. The pasuk there says like this: that if a man is me'anas a girl, he rapes a girl who's married, she's married. So what happens to the man? Gets killed. Why? Ish is ish. What happens to the woman? Nothing. Because the pasuk says that just like somebody kills somebody else, so do it as if somebody killed her, meaning that she was ne'anas. Now the Gemara is bothered. What did the pasuk add by giving us a mashal? Whenever you give a mashal, you have to find something. The pasuk already said she had no choice. Now she cried out. Nobody saved her. What's the pasuk added to us by telling us it's like somebody chased after somebody to kill him? And then what did we gain from that? Really, we gain nothing from it. The Gemara says the title. Just like a person kills his friend. So is this matter. What did we learn from Ritzeach by Naam Osa? This is a situation where we have a pasuk that seems to be teaching us halacha legabe Naam Osa, but really it's teaching us halacha about Ritzeach. Makish Ritzeach Naam Osa. Ma Naam Osa telatzal b'nafsho. Just like if you see somebody about to be ma'anas a girl, one's allowed to kill him. How do we know that? How do you know if you see somebody about to ma'anas a girl, you're allowed to kill him? I hinted at it before. What? Which part of the pasuk?
It's like a man who rises up.
No, that's later. The answer is because the pasuk says she cried out and nobody saved her. Mashma, that anybody that could have should have saved her. And Rashi says saved her in any way possible, even to the extent of killing. So therefore, just like by Naam Osa, you're allowed to kill the one who's trying to be manasa. That means the pasuk says that Naam Osa is like a murder, raping is like murder, to tell you that just like by Ma'anas, you're allowed to save them and the girl in any possible way. Also, Ritzeach, you can save in any possible way. But Naam Osa b'Ritzeach, then we learn another halacha. Ma Ritzeach yoig val yavoy, just like by Ritzeach. If a person says to kill or be killed, better to die. Better she should die if she's offered the choice to die or to be killed. Better she should die. What? To sorry, I should have said to agree to have beer, to have relations or to die. So how do you know anything about Shvichas Damim? Small. Somebody came to Rava, the master of the town said, kill so and so. If not, I'll kill you. They should kill you. Don't kill anybody else. Who told you that your blood is sweeter or redder? Maybe the other person's blood is sweeter or redder. There's a lot of halachas. Let's just get the Gemara very clear first. We'll start slowly. A person came to Rava and said, somebody asked me to kill or be killed. Said, Rava, better die than to kill. Why? Who says that your blood is better than somebody else's blood? Rashi explains like this. Normally, when a person's offered a choice to do an avera, it's better that he should do that avera than die. Why? Because it says v'chayvoim. V'chayvoim says you have to live. V'chayvoim neshiyos. But over here, Rava was saying to this person, you've got two problems over here. You've got the avera of killing, plus somebody is going to die. So normally, if it would only be the avera, we would say better do that than to die. But since come what may, someone's going to die. So therefore, who says that your blood is more important? V'chaypohem is going on him just as much as it's going on you. And since it's going on him just as much as on you, so therefore you've got no v'chaypohem. Once you've got no v'chaypohem, you've just got the avera. So who says you should do it? That's the Lomdus of Rava's answer. And from there we learn the same thing by a woman, that Na'amarosa, why does the Torah compare Na'amarosa to Ritzeach? To teach us that just like Na'amarosa, that she's got a choice, die or be nanas, or be raped. So therefore she has to better to die. Now, there's a very big problem with all of this Gemara, is that if you look carefully at the Gemara speaks about the female. The Gemara says, after Na'amarosa tehoreg, she shall be killed, and she shouldn't be over. Now, do we know of any woman that preferred to be raped rather than die? Any tzaddikas woman? There's two very great women, Esther Hamalka and Yoel with Sisra. In both cases, they preferred to have to do tashmish rather than die. And the Gemara Sanhedrin asks the question, and the Gemara says the reason being because by a man it requires a positive act. A woman is karka olam, meaning a woman doesn't actually do anything. She's passive. A passive act is not the same. From here, Rav Chaim, the one most famous Rav Chaim, discusses the following question, and it's getting a bit complicated, but it's interesting to hear. Is that what happens if somebody says to you, I'm going to tie you up, I'm going to pick you up off the roof, throw you onto a child, the child will die. Are you mechuyev to die rather than to allow the act to be done? No, assuming that we know the child will die. But the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that Esther did not die because she was karkolim, she was passive. So therefore, L'chayra says the same halacha would be that one would not mechuyev to die, one can carry on living because he's not doing an active act. The problem is that over here the Gemara says to horig v'al she should die rather than to be over. So if you look at top Tosach of Hemud base after that, so he changes the letters. Yehorig v'al yavoy says to let's read the Tosach. Pil shaboil. Aval he tipoy v'loitoy to kakoilami, and therefore you have to change the gilsa. Tosach changed the gilsa from female to male. The v'oima, the 4 lines down. The shafi gilsa on the horig. And he says that many times a woman needs, let's say, for example, they say to a woman, either cause it to happen, either encourage and submit yourself in a way and make it happen, or die. So then she has to do something, not always a sheikh. Again, let's go through this. Quite a lot of halachas. Again, we know there are 3 averas that it's better to die rather than to be over. The 3 averas are avodah zarah, gvura, shvichas damim. Avodah zarah, what's the makor of avodah zarah? Where's the source? No. Love of Hashem is murder, how do we know? What? It's a logic. It's a svar. It's a logic. Gilu Avoyos, how do we know? Pasuk. The Pasuk compares Gilu Avoyos to Ritzecha. It's like a hekesh. It's a hekesh. Agav, the Chaschiduch writes That he wants to say as follows: that legabi gilu avois a benoach doesn't need to be died, because then the apostle who says legabi ritzeach, he says it's a logic. A logic is something which even the benoach is mechuyev in, and therefore even if you've got no apostle, therefore maybe you should be mechuyev to die rather than to kill. Now, no, the Torah chose to talk about in that case. The reason being is, but I just say very briefly, Namaros is a girl that's done kedushin, not nisuin. So she's done the mais kedushin, but she's not living with her husband. So she's more likely to be out and about, and therefore it's more. That's technically. No, but that's not the case. No, but she still won't be at home with her husband, even in such case. Okay, there's a very big machlokes with Shonim regarding what about karka olam. We said karka olam is nafkamina legabe a woman, and it's a nafkamina legabe a Esther, and it's a nafkamina in that case of Reb Chaim when somebody asks you to be thrown off a roof. Whether you there's a famous tshuva of Yehuda that there was once a group of travelers and they were attacked by robbers. And what happened was they were about to kill them all. And one of the women decided to seduce them, and she managed thereby to save everybody's life. And it caused a huge furor, if that's how you say the word, amongst the poskim as to whether she had done the right thing or the wrong. And the Yehuda writes a very sharp tshuva that she had done the wrong thing, because it says better she should die, because it says that's like the second thesis, the second pshat thesis. That here she was doing karka olam. He says that's not called karka olam. She had to go and seduce. He says, what about Esther? Esther, he says, is different because she was saving the whole of Klal Yisrael.
Yeah, but she didn't actually do. Esther was also different.
Why?
Because remember the whole conversation she had with.
Yeah, but she went to Achashverosh,
yes,
invited him to a Su'udah, and she obviously knew that at the end of the Su'udah, what would you do? That's how the one portion explained. What did she do? She went to Su'udah Achashverosh, I can invite you to a party. What did she expect to happen at the end of the party? That was the solution.
That wasn't the nice of doing it.
But afterwards, she didn't need to go with him. She could have stayed at home without going with him. So she went to him to save him. Yes.
This goes against Robert. Robert's saying one person's blood is better than another person's blood. You can't make that argument. But surely one person's blood is better than four people's blood.
Over here, you would be true in a case of by Ritzicha. But the question is, what would be the case by
the story
by seducing? But there, you don't have the logic, because there, once you have the hekesh to Ritzicha, the Torah is telling you that Gilu Avois is more important to die. Then you don't have the logic of, depends if it's one or few. And now that you mentioned it, I have to tell you that there's a Marsham's tshuva, fascinating tshuva. Unfortunately, very sad tshuva. What happens if somebody's asked, die? Let's say 4 of you will die, unless you find somebody else to take in your place. That means the government are looking for a particular. That's the doctor. So it's vague. But he still is besupuk, because at the end of the day, you're taking somebody who you're finding somebody to do what? So that's the famous kasha of Reb Chaim. The first Reb Chaim in the Sefer on the Rambam, as the Gemara tells us that if you've only got 1 cup of water and you go to shed, how does that fit with this? And that's how he answers. What?
When you have your cup of water,
that's how he answers it.
What is that?
That when you're drinking the water, you're not doing an Avera. At the end of the day, yes, you are. You're taking somebody. You're taking somebody to be killed.
Come to that. The guy should be allowed to kill another guy, though.
Why?
Because they didn't have that Avera of keeping
the logic. No, but the logic of my chozes they might have. There's a sefer. There's a sefer. I only read 1 chiluk of it. It's 6 chalakim of tshuvas. Zeref told me he had all 6 chalakim. Somebody wrote a tshuvas farm from the Second World War. It's the most horrific sefer. And it's gone out of my mind the name of the sefer. I only read 1 chiluk. Somebody who actually went through the Holocaust and has got shaila after shaila after shaila of this. Okay, I can't have to look it up. But
we say these 3 things. Only 2 of them are learned from the Torah. How can murder be such a
right? That's it.
It's a logic, yeah.
It's a logic,
makes sense,
yes.
but it's not possible.
It's not possible.
It's being told to us by.
What is the situation?
Yeah, so he's got that tshuva after tshuva of different stories. About a person, for example, I mean, one of the famous tshuvas is brought down. He says himself that somebody was taken, a child was taken, somebody had the money to bribe a Nazi guard to swap his child for another, but he knew that and he passed it to him that you can't do it.
Back in Russia, you take
Yes, that's right. Yes.
No, yeah, but that wasn't killing them.
Basically.
No,
So
cancer
it's sending them
this.
to their death, isn't it?
Cancer says it wasn't. No, they weren't killed.
And then in
Well,
Germany,
it's
Nazis
the
it
army,
was.
It's not the Tzichem.
It's a lot. Okay, but this case is a thing.
Physically,
Oh,
anyway.
right. So the nicer. So it's asked the Shaila, what happens if a person's ready but in a matzah of kishui? And then what happens is they say to him that either die or put a woman to lie on top of you. But then again, you've got Shailas. These are many of the Shailas. Is a person also bechuv to die? Compared to Vitzicha, you could say it's a passive act, but Vitzicha will be okay. So maybe that should be also okay. Okay, there's a lot. We'll have to get through it. Baba Ravashi, what?
Is that when you as well?
Oh, that's a very, very important Shaila. That is a very, very important Shaila. This goes a little bit back to the traces on the bottom of Chav Chei Amud Aleph. The Gemara tells in Sanhedrin that there was once a man who was deathly ill. The Gemara in Sanhedrin. And they said that the only way he'll get better because he had fallen in some obsession with a woman. So the only way is that so they said, no, you can't bet he should die. So he said, okay, at least you should stand in front of him dressed. That didn't work. Eventually they said the only thing is that will make him, let him just talk to her without even looking at her. They both stand on the other side of a fence and talk. What if she yoms? Bet he should die. That's what Sanhedrin says. There's a very big machlokas Rishonim what's chat in that sugya, because there's no issa deraisa of talking to a woman by defense. We'll do it all the time. So what's the problem? So there are two mahalchim in the Rishonim. So I wanted to say there's some who hold that by Mr. Gemara was exila, so you are sure because of the fact that since it was a matzav of bizoyon that he was doing it to satisfy his yetzer, therefore. But there are many Rishonim. The Ran over here says that once the Torah says that you're not allowed to, you're better to die, then even if it's only a lav, and even if it's only a drabonon issa of avodah zarah, one is better to die than to be over. So even if it's only like a vuzvayu and things like that, it's better to die. Okay, right, so we're getting less willing out of that. He was rubbing on his daughter, he was using olives which were not ripened of olah, and they were meant to make her better. It's not a matter of danger. How can you do such a thing? She's got temperature. Nami as well. It's a matter of danger. Temperature, a burning temperature, is like a matter of sakana. I'm doing it shlik derech hano. And both towards the brought down halacha that a temperature which is particularly high is like a matter of sakana. Furthermore, that a person is allowed to be nena shloike derech hano by olah. Now we're going to have a whole sugya which is going on for some time. So let's get it clear. We're discussing now an indirect hano. Many cases about it. I've seen there's hundreds of truths about it. Let's say, for example, you live next to a church and they play music to avodah zarah. Do you have to close the windows? Somebody told me, I don't remember this, that at the bottom of Bernie Road towards town, there was a huge brewery. And they said there were people, what? Or maybe it's still, I don't know. And the smell spreads very far. The question is on Pesach, do you have to close the windows? I don't know if the question going to Tesco. And then what happens is, there's nice baked food, you can smell it. So listen to music from can you go and look at can you walk past the church and enjoy the sights of the church? Things like that. These are very
story,
right.
Kid's story. Where a guy used to walk past the butchers. I think it was Yehuda, I think it was.
Right.
I think it was Yehuda. He wanted to take in the pauper. The butcher got all really annoyed. The guy stand there smelling his pastrami.
So he gave him.
He took him to the dinner. He said, yeah, no problem. Give him the money and jump in front of him. So the same, no.
So there, yeah. Oh. So that's the shayla. So we talk about what's the word? Not indirect hano. Hano, which has happened without intention, and then there are 4 situations, and each situation is going to be many different shit. So let's get the 4 basic situations. You've got when you want to enjoy it and when you don't intend to enjoy it, and you've got when you've got an option to avoid it or when it's difficult to avoid it. And all the Rishonim say the same point. Now, when we say that it's impossible to avoid it, we don't mean literally impossible. We mean that it's difficult to avoid it. The Ram Chalava writes, even if it just means walking on a longer journey, that's already considered impossible to avoid it. Because at the end of the day, it is difficult to avoid it. So there's 4 situations where you intend to enjoy it, when you don't intend to enjoy it. When you are difficult to avoid it, when it's just as easy to avoid it as it is to do it. Now, Rashi himself asks the question already. That if you intend to enjoy it, in what way is this called an indirect hana? And Rashi explains, because we're talking about somebody that never went for that purpose. You go to Tesco to buy apples and oranges. While you're walking around Tesco, you're enjoying the smell. It is true, for example, you might want it and you might be happy for it and you might be thrilled with it, but that's not a direct hana. That's not why you went to Tesco to get it. That is the shayla we have. It's pleasure that comes against his will. If it's possible to avoid it easily, it means as easily. And you intend to have the smell. That's both things for the bat. Or it's impossible, meaning it's awkward to avoid it. But you intend to enjoy it. According to this, it would be also to go and enjoy the pleasures of a smell while you're walking in Tesco. We'll see the Gemara brings another shit. If it's impossible, and you don't intend, every degree is permitted. When you've got the ability to avoid it, but you don't intend. What's the famous example? What's the basic machlikas? Many times. What's the main machlikas of Vidam Shimon? That's the situation when they both agree. When it's not the situation, what's the machlikas? You're pulling a table across your ground because you want to be able to sit in a different part of the garden. And the question is, you want at the same time you make furrows in the ground. So now, is there a possibility to avoid it? Yes. What? You could carry it. But the problem is, it's difficult to carry, so you want to just drag it. Now, are you mechaven? That's the machlikas. Keeping the efsha v'loika mechaven. Just like when you put a table, it is awesome. So too, over here, even though you're not intending to make furrows, your intention is only to have another table somewhere else, it is awesome. Who had in over here, when you're intending not to go there for that, it's still awesome. When it's possible to avoid, no. That means Rava, in fact, is arguing with Abaya, pshat in Rab Shimon. And according to Rava, if a person has a table and it's just as easy to carry it on his shoulders as to drag it along the floor, what's he mechayiv to do according to Rab Shimon? Carry it. It's only when it's difficult, then Rab Shimon agrees. When you can avoid it, lo it is also. Ikadami, we have a second version. When a person's got the choice to avoid it, and he has no intention, and he put a bit of Rab Shimon, that's why Rab Shimon because it's mutter, because it's lo mechavan, because it's also. Lo yefshav lo mechavan, because you don't intend and you don't want it. So and you've got no way of avoiding it. Machlekes is when you've got both problems, when it's impossible to avoid, but you intend. The more explains like this, an interesting cheshbon. Here we're going to find, normally whenever we talk about Shimon and Yehuda, we always say like this: who's the maker from Shimon and Yehuda? Who's the lenient? Shimon. Shimon says you're allowed to drag a table because he says the Gemara says, but from Rab Shimon's logic, one can infer a very big chumrah. Rab Shimon obviously understands that the ikar of a person is what his mind is intending. It makes no difference if he's got an easy way to avoid or not easy way to avoid. Either way, since there's no intention of making the furrows, it is mutter. Therefore, in the case where a person is intending, he actually has intention to do it. So then it's also even in a situation when he could avoid it. Why? When he can't avoid it. When he can't avoid it. That means when he can't avoid it, even according to Rab Shimon, it is also why? Because since Rab Shimon holds that the ikar of a person is always his machshava, and Davish in Miskavan, according to Rab Shimon, is mutter, so when it's mechavan, it is also, even if you can't avoid it. So Abaya says it's also. Abaya Rabbi Yehuda. So Abaya that permits it says the more must hold like Rabbi Yehuda. V'hova Malach Ad Kan top of Chov V'hova Madalef. V'hova Malach Ad Kan Lekum Rabbi Yehuda Shem Miskaven K'Miskaven Elachumma. He only said that Miskaven is the Mechaven like the Chumma. And Miskaven Shem Miskaven Lekula Loi. That means you could infer from Yehuda that you could be Mekel. It says more no. Rabbi Yehuda was just being machmid that Dov Shem Miskaven is like a Miskaven. But to say that is according to Rabbi Yehuda, you could argue that we don't care what your intention is. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, even if you have no intention, it is also. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can say that when you do have intention, it should also be mutter because it doesn't care about the main thing is whether it's efsha or no efsha. So it's more no, it's only lechum or not lechum. I just want to do a little bit of inside because I ought to say, by the way, we pass them for the reference. Okay, we do a little bit outside, maybe a little bit. It's very interesting. Here. We pass the Bible, who do pass like? Bible, who do pass like? Always like Rav except for 6 times, the Alkigam. So this is not one of the 6 times pass like Rav. Lishta Kama Lishta Basa, who do we pass like? Always Lishta Basa. So therefore we go quote Lishta Basa. So let's work it very, very slowly. Efsha, that means if it's impossible to avoid and it's impossible and you don't intend, that's okay. So that would be a case where you need to go to Tesco to buy something. And you don't enjoy it, you don't have intention to enjoy it, you don't think to yourself, I'm going there for this, also forget it. That's mutter. In a case where a person is efsha v'loika mechavan, that means he's got a way to avoid it and he's got no intention, we would also be maker because we said we passed like is mutter. In a case where to lo efsha v'kom mechavan, where a person has no ability, but he enjoys it, so then it is asa. And therefore, the Chofetz Chaim comes out from over here, a very important halacha. The halacha is like this, that if you're sitting in the room and everybody's speaking Lashon Hara, now, you can't avoid the room. Let's say, for example, you're sitting at a simcha, you can't go out. We just said before, lo efsha doesn't mean that it's impossible. That's oinus. Lo efsha means that it's difficult. It's a longer way around, etc. Says the Chofetz Chaim that it's a case of lo efsha. And lo efsha, if you're mechavan, that means if you sit there and you say to yourself, I'm enjoying this Lashon Hara, it is worthwhile coming just to hear this Lashon Hara, that's no good. So therefore, when you're sitting and hearing Lashon Hara, you should be not only lo efsha, but you should also make sure not to be mechavan, that you shouldn't intend to have it. I don't want to use the Lashon of Rashi. If you've got a ability, I'm not going to go by it. We'll stop over here. We'll stop. But the truth matters, I always get nervous. It comes to Thursday, Friday. Friday is always short. Tomorrow, maybe. If you look over here, with base, Rashi says like this, because this is important. Rashi, what does it mean? Become mechavan. Rashi says, "Hachgos and efshka mechavan, efshka mechavan, kamei pigid also efshka lo libado." Become mechavan niskalv k'dei lehenus gemechshav v'dazok. That means he has a pleasure in it. That means what happens is he is intending and he has a pleasure from it. That is considered, according to this Gemara, it is asa. That is right. So that is the machlekes. Le'efshek ha'mechavan, it is asa. So therefore, if you're sitting in a place, you can't. It's another nafkin in the Chofetz Chaim, right? It's very, very harshly. And let's say, for example, you've got no choice. You're sitting on the train, and you've got no choice. There's radio blaring, and it's got a woman singing, right? Or you can see preachers. The Chofetz Chaim writes that if you're mechavan, you're being over an essa, because even though it's lo yefsha, but once you be mechavan, it's things you have to show that you don't want it. You have to make an effort to not be mechavan. We're up to Chavava Medalef Omar Abaya, which continues with this subject. Right, shkur. How are you, Moshe, Ian, and Levi? How are you all doing?
Yeah, box, I'm fine.
Right, so what's the halacha about being thrown off a roof to land in somebody's head? Shaila, come up. No, I tell you what comes up. Oh, I should have said Siamese twins. Moshe got famous tshuva about Siamese twins. One was born with 4 chambers, one was born with 2 chambers. And they said the only way to do it is to
Said the woman's
yes, that's the Moshe was matter to separate them, even though it calls the okay. Okay, that's the